So real quickly, thank you so much for coming today. I know that everyone's all over the place, but most of our delegates are here. And so he's been gracious enough to meet with us at the Latino Caucus, and now he's taking time to meet with us here. So what I want to do is, first of all, just welcome you. And this is our core group from the Sangro Valley, and I'm going to let Blanca say a few words as well.
Well, I'm Assemblywoman Rubio. We met earlier today, and we just wanted to introduce you to Team Rubio. I am an Assembly member, and Senator Susan Rubio is my sister, one of the first sisters in the state of California to ever serve in the legislature. So it was a big deal. But we spoke about immigration. I wanted you to know that Susan and I were deported when we were kids, and we were undocumented until I was 13 and she was 12. So we are the American dream that we talk about in terms of immigration and really becoming something that people didn't the current president didn't expect us to be, Senator of the state of California and Assembly member of the state of California. But we couldn't do this without all of these folks that supported us on the ground, have been supporting us for more than a decade. And so these are our worker bees, our foot soldiers that have gotten us to where we are. And so we want to give you an opportunity to meet these foot soldiers because they can be critical in any election.
Especially when the establishment isn't with you.
And I will say, and Blanca, kind of shared her story, but Blanca is the first deported Assembly member in history. I am the first deported senator in the state history. I mean, it's not something that we brag, but just to show you what California is, definitely our community is. It's a lot of, immigrant families, and so I just want to say, yes, hardworking families, and so we don't have a lot of time, so I know they're all taking pictures, so let's sit down and have a conversation. And I want to just let you take the floor, but starting with immigration, I don't want to pose a question. I just want you to talk freely about your vision, and I know you did so, but let's make sure that everyone hears about it as well.
Sounds good.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your leadership. And I'm glad to be in a room that understands the power of grassroots organizing. Obviously, you don't go from being mayor of South Bend, Indiana, to being a serious contender for the presidential election without really seeing the value of people on the ground who aren't doing it because the establishment says so, aren't doing it because it's expected to be easy, but believe in a vision, share a vision and a dream, and work to get something done. And that's very much the spirit of our campaign as well. Specifically when it comes to questions around immigration, I view it through the perspective of my own experience. First of all, my life experience as somebody whose father came to this country because of educational opportunities in the 1970s and then decided to become American and made that choice and became part of our community, shaped lives as an educator. And I think about the doctors who treated him at the end of his life, who were immigrants who had come to our country seeking a better life and who made our community better. And I think about the entire way in which a country and any community grows, that has always had so much to do with immigration. So it begins before we even get into the policy with the recognition that when somebody arrives in this country, they are not only exercising their choice, they are bearing a gift and making a community a better place. And yet we do not have a president, we do not have an enforcement structure, and we do not have a body of laws that reflects that. And so there are steps we need to take, steps that can happen on day one, steps that are going to take major legislation, and things we need to do for the long term to make sure that we make good on our values as a country when it comes to welcoming our newest Americans, and when it comes to supporting families that may have mixed status and ensuring that that does not harm their ability to thrive. What does that look like? Well, first of all, on the border, it means ensuring that the border is managed in a way that is consistent with our values. An end to family separation, an end to the kind of for-profit detention of children that we've seen, that I saw myself when we visited a facility in Homestead where we were denied access, but sought to shine the light on what was happening. And what we have got to do on day one is erase all of these cruel practices that are indefensible. So much so even the president pretends he has no idea how they happen, right? No idea how child separation happened, and yet here we are. That's day one. But there's a lot of work we're going to have to do with your grassroots support to fix the legal framework that handles immigration in this country.
They say, well, we're for legal immigration, but they're not. They make it harder to come to this country lawfully. And so a real reform needs to create a pathway to citizenship for those who are undocumented, needs to protect dreamers and give dreamers a route to citizenship, also needs to fix the legal immigration system, change the country caps that have no basis in reality, change the bureaucracy, the waiting lists, all of the things that have been stacked up against people and families as they seek to do the right thing for themselves and for those they love. And we know that there is an American majority that supports this. But like so many other issues, from a higher minimum wage to common sense gun reform, just because there is a majority right now in the American people doesn't mean you get a majority in the American Congress. And so it's why we need presidential leadership and ultimately reform of our system, so that that majority can have its voice heard. But also, it's why we're going to need a nominee and a president who can hold together that majority. Because people are with us more than not. Even on the issues where our party used to be on defense, people are with us right now. And I see an opportunity to unify this nation while building up the answers that we need to make. In other words, I would urge you not to listen to the idea that it's either we solve policy problems by alienating half the country, or we bring everybody together by doing nothing at all and watering down our values. I refuse to believe that those are our two choices. I think we can do big, bold things, and we can do them together. As a matter of fact, I believe that's the only way to make it happen. So hopefully that gives you some sense of what's in my heart as we go into this race, but maybe we can talk about some things in more detail.
Well, and I want to take the time to just share with you, these are all our delegates, but the delegates are comprised from a lot of local leaders.
City
And
council
so
members,
I
school
want
board
to just real
members,
quickly
water
ask,
board.
those of you that are elected leaders to raise your hand, and only because these are the people that shape policy that are in the ground, listening to the families either crying about their loved one that got deported, children that don't have services. We have several school board members, raise your hand if you're school board members, making decisions every day for immigrant communities. Council members, raise your hand. Alejandra, and okay, and so we do have
We got
water
some water
board
board
members,
members.
raise your hand. We have, where are my water board members? There's several.
I'm always ready to geek out on water and wastewater.
And Mount Sac, Laura is a trustee
Community
for,
college.
Community College, Mount Sac, and so all our delegates in one way or the other shape policy. And they really are the ones that are hearing the stories about, our kids, our families being afraid. You heard it earlier, a lot of our kids don't want to go to school because they're afraid that they're going to come home and mom and dad are going to be missing. So I just want to acknowledge all the elected officials here who really, they're here, they're delegates, but they've been doing the work on the ground. So I will open it up if anyone has any particular questions.
One concern that I have is, everything that's going on with Trump is not respecting the Constitution and people making their own rules. That's really breaking our democracy.
Meaning that they can do whatever they want, and just the indecency, the lies. And when I hear you, it's reminiscence of the Kennedys, of Bobby Kennedy,
It's a flattering comparison.
and that's what we need back. So what is it, everything that you can bring us together? Because these are really scary times, because our Constitution is something valuable. It's a piece of paper, but if people are not upholding it, we're seeing what's happening right now with Ukraine, with Russia,
Right.
with Putin sitting there and playing Trump as a puppet. And the military, what he did in Syria broke my heart. And it scares me because then they're gonna monopolize the Middle East.
Yeah, it's even now we are probably underreacting to how serious it is to have a U.S. president who doesn't believe in the Constitution and who doesn't believe in American honor. That's why the Syria situation is so heartbreaking. I always felt when I was deployed that the flag on my shoulder was one of the things that kept me safe, because it stood for a country that keeps its word. And our allies saw that, and our enemies saw that, and believed that we kept our word. So when we lose that, we lose a lot. When we lose a president's commitment to the Constitution at home, it is a crisis. And the way we use political speech and political office matters so much in so many ways. One of the things I admire about Bobby Kennedy is the way that he used language to make people bigger and make people feel bigger. Because this is also about how people feel about themselves. In the same way that a child who is comfortable and happy and well-adjusted and secure generally does not become a bully.
I think the same is true of the country. And unfortunately, it's easier to use political speech in political office to make people feel fearful and small and backward and mean. But it's more important and worth it, even if it's hard, to use office to make people feel whole and open and secure and ready to embrace one another across our different experiences, different identities.
And I think a lot about the importance of a sense of belonging in this country right now. I think this is the core issue for all of us. And in addition to all of the policies we gotta deliver, we need a president who can make us feel a sense of belonging in the shared American experience, which is already where the people are, but it needs to be brought together in the vision of the president.
Mayor, as a combat veteran, one of the, I'm also a disabled veteran, also a combat veteran. Our biggest issue getting out of the service was the services that we got when we got out. There's no transition from military to civilian life. And it literally took me, having all my paperwork, took me about 7 years to get my disability claims going through. And it was just, and even then, it was really hard to do. What can you do? How do you envision changing the VA and the services for our veterans and for people that have actually served? And the other, and along with that is, how do you feel about all of the veterans that are not citizens that are being deported?
Yeah.
Because that, I feel, is if you serve this country, if you're willing to give your life for this country, then the least you can do is get a citizenship.
Be part of the country.
Yeah.
Grant them citizenship.
Yeah, there has to be a remedy for people who've served in uniform and have been deported. And to the earlier question you're asking about, I view this as America's need to keep a promise. This is not about doing a favor to anybody. This is people raise their right hands and make a promise to the United States. And that promise is supposed to work both ways. And it is supposed to last a lifetime, not just while you're in uniform. And so when you have to go abroad and battle an enemy, and then you come home and you're battling a computer, right? You're battling a bureaucracy just to get served, just to get things that you've earned. That is America falling down on its promise. And there are several steps that we can and have to take right away to deal with this. First of all, funding, so that the wait lists are not what they are. Secondly, supporting the levels of pay that would get us the providers we need clinically, who can make sure that we can see people quickly. The computer systems, as you know, are just a mess. And it should be seamless. Your record from the Marine Corps, from NNPS probably, or whatever system, it's not elegant, but it's a electronic medical record. Nobody should have to touch it for it to go to the VA and become your VA medical record. But they don't talk to each other. And it doesn't sound like a big political fight, it sounds like a technical thing, but if we don't fix it, and that means a political fight to get the money to invest in these things, but also to make sure that there's coordination, which is why I think the person in charge of linking the DoD, the active duty side, to the VA, needs to sit in the White House, needs to have the authority to get the right people in the room and figure out when it breaks down. Because when you're in the military, you spend half the time just navigating your own branch, right? Part of the power of the White House is to cut through all of them. And we need to use that power to cut the red tape that is getting in the way of veterans getting services that they earn, especially when it's a service-connected issue. Because, again, this is not a favor, this is a promise.
Hi, so, my mom makes less than $30K a year, and her employer has never really given her insurance, health insurance, or they had it at one point, took it away. Anyway, she doesn't have it now. And even under Covered California, her rates are about $180, $190 a month. Like, it really is a burden for her. So I would just like to hear more about your health plan. I mean, I think we've heard a lot of different things from all the candidates, Medicare for All to expanding sort of Obamacare. So I just want to hear a little bit more about that and why you think your plan is the best.
Sure. So our plan, we call Medicare for All Who Want It. And the idea is that it shouldn't depend on your employer whether you can get care. Some people have employers who give them great care, and that's great. But you shouldn't have to, especially because our generation is going to be changing employers more and more often than prior generations. Our system was built at a time when you could assume you were going to have one job or one employer for most of your life. And it just, for many people, it's not going to work that way. So we need a better system. Now, the idea of what I call Medicare for all who want it is we take a version of Medicare, but we also establish a subsidy structure so that it's never unaffordable. It's either free or subsidized for anybody where that's going to be an issue. And we allow everybody to participate who wants to, but we don't require you to participate. And the reason is I do meet a lot of people, I'm thinking about a lot of union members, for example, who sometimes gave up on wages in a concession in order to get the better health plan. I don't want to kick them off of that health plan. I believe that many, probably most people will eventually choose the public plan we create. If everybody chooses it, then eventually that is Medicare for all. But if some people choose something different, if some people decide something different is better for them, then we're going to be glad we didn't kick them off of what they had. And so to me, it's a little more humility in the policy that says, we don't know for you or you or you if this is going to be right, but I know it's going to be better than what a lot of people have, and it takes that problem off the table. Now we also have to reform the system, the Medicare system we have, to make it more user-friendly, to make it more affordable, to make, right now there's a lot of red tape in that process too, and we've got to do something about that, because as a country, we spend far too much of our dollar in bureaucracy, in healthcare, instead of patient care, which is what we want to make sure that we're supporting and incentivizing.
Betsy, you have a question? And just real quickly, we're gonna have like 7-8 more minutes so we can keep our questions.
I have a lot that touch on education, on health, and the homeless, but I think my biggest one is, how do you plan to bring this nation together? Because I feel like a lot of racism has really resurfaced.
Yes.
And I think just 2 weeks ago, I was at the Museum of Tolerance, and it's really scary to think that something like that could potentially happen again.
Good question.
Yeah, if there's one thing we've learned in this country, it's that you can't just take a racist system or policy and replace it with a neutral one and expect things to get better on their own. It takes work, it takes resources, it takes leadership. That's why I want to invest in entrepreneurship when we have immigrant and minority-led businesses that are making such a difference. That's why we need to make sure the political power is there, because part of how we are where we are is racially motivated gerrymandering and voter suppression, right? All of these things are required in order to make sure that we have full political participation by everybody who represents the diversity of this country. But it's even more than the policy work. It's the moral work of having a president who is committed to bringing us together. Right now we have a divider in chief. And this country, we're at each other's throats. I think a lot of people are nervous as they look ahead to Thanksgiving, because the conversation might be a minefield in a lot of families. Even within our families, there's division, right? And that weakens our country. It makes this a more dangerous place to be. And so, as president, it's not just about ensuring that there is no tolerance for hatred, no tolerance for discrimination, that we beat back white nationalist violence that is a danger. But it's also about the tone that we set, that establishes that this country belongs to all of us. And right now they're finding so many different ways to tell you you don't belong, that you don't get to be part of America. Real America is something, who knows what it is, but it's not you, is what they're telling us, basically, in different ways. And the job of the president is to let everybody see where they fit, morally, and then to have the policies that reflect that. And it's on my mind as a mayor of a very diverse community, where part of my job is to let everybody know, regardless of race, regardless of citizenship status, that they are the residents of the city, and I'm there to protect them and support them and help them thrive. It's also got to be the thing the president gets out of bed in the morning and thinks about every day. And it's the kind of president I want him to be.
Mayor, before we go forward, I failed to introduce our regional director, Primo Castro, back there at the end. He is our leader, so to speak, but also very involved with cancer. And do you want to just talk real quickly about yourself?
Absolutely. So, I am an advocate, a lobbyist for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, a 501c4 organization. Just great welcoming you, obviously, Team Rubio all the way. One of the things that obviously that is very important for us, and I think this is especially for the San Gabriel Valley, is the issue of healthcare. It was already touched upon, but Latinos, especially Latinos, communities of color have, large numbers of cancer rates, of chronic illnesses. We're talking about diabetes, we're talking about, you name it. So we definitely need a system that is gonna be that provides prevention, screening, and we've seen what the current White House administration has been doing in terms of taking a lot of these provisions out. It's not enough that we keep kids on their parents' plan until the age of 26. That's just not enough. Especially when minorities, undocumented, are I have family in the tri-state area, right? So the migrant community, obviously, right? In your neck of the woods. So we want to make sure that we're seeing not only a backlash against immigrants, but a lot of them are going underground. We want to make sure that we're lucky here in the San Gabriel Valley that leadership through Susan and Blanca, that people undocumented, people of color don't have to fear. But that's taken a lot of work, not just from them, but from everybody in this room, in this table, a lot of the leadership here. So we want to make sure that we focus on that people don't have to be afraid, right? So I love hearing what you have to say in terms of how do we invest more on screening and prevention, especially in communities of need.
Yeah. Well, exclusion has public health consequences, right? There's a cost in life expectancy and well-being in so many different ways. And we're seeing that play out in some of the statistics or the patterns that you're mentioning. One thing I think we need to do is fund what I call health equity zones, which is to allow communities to develop solutions, because it's going to look different in Indiana than it looks here. But what's true across the board is that the community needs to put together a solution that deals with all the different factors that contribute to this. Is this a fear of seeking treatment? Is it a lack of culturally competent clinicians? Is it a language issue? And of course, what happens in the clinical environment is arguably less than half of the challenge. Environmental justice is a huge part of this, because we know that people are more likely to live in areas where there is contamination. They're from communities of color or low income or both. And whether we're talking about lead poisoning or whether we're talking about the different determinants of cancer, we know that those things are related. So it comes back to housing. We know that access to food, access to safe recreation, right? One of the biggest determinants for whether somebody's going to have diabetes or heart disease is just whether they walk. And whether they walk depends on whether their community was able to establish a safe place with lights on where they felt like they could take their kids on a stroll. Right? I mean, these things sound so basic, but my point is that the answers don't all have to come from Washington, but the funding should. And so we allow us health equity zones to be built at the community level, and then we fund them in a robust way. Billions of dollars need to go out to our communities with a view toward building up that kind of community. And that, I think, will do as much as the work that I also hope we do on the research side with CDC and NIH and the federally funded research, so that we learn more about prevention. And so that when we get to the other side of screening, we're better off in terms of treatment. But as you say, so much of this is before we get to treatment, and I'm very mindful of that in terms of what policy can do across the board.
So we have about like 2 minutes, so I'm gonna go with Laura and then our board member.
So our multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry, equity programs have been put in this inequitable industry. They're failing. What are your ideas to address this, specifically people of color's lack of real estate and capital to participate, especially post-mortgage crisis when we lost so much wealth?
Exactly, and that's what it is. So as worried as I am about the income gap, it's the wealth gap that is the most alarming. And again, we see it in my community, we see it across the country. And most wealth in this country is inherited. So access and inheritance decide whether people then have the freedom to go into business. You add to that the restrictions in the cannabis industry where financing is such a problem, you basically have to have some way to get a bunch of cash together. And it winds up reinforcing the inequity because you have to already be doing well in order to have a chance at doing well. So what can we do about that? Well, reform to the credit system, for sure. I'm proposing that we increase the funding that goes into CDFIs, community development financial institutions that are specifically designed to help capitalize underrepresented, or as I sometimes call them, underestimated business owners. So the way we would do it, not to get too technical, but we would increase the CRA credits for funding that goes into CDFIs, just to make sure more of the capital is flowing into these kinds of businesses. it means recognizing that it matters what we do with taxpayer dollars too. And ensuring, I've proposed a 25% target for federal purchasing dollars to go to businesses led by women and minorities who have the best track record of creating opportunity economically for women and minorities. And it's the right thing to do, but also I think will lead to better business decisions in the long run. And specifically around the cannabis industry, we have a responsibility to do the right thing on equity because of the inequity of the harms of the drug war. You know, we're in a community that is dealing with the opioid epidemic, and in the course of dealing with the opioid epidemic, there's been a lot of enlightenment about the fact that this is a medical, not a criminal issue. But a lot of activists are approaching me saying, you know, it's great that everybody is so forward-looking now, but where was everybody during the crack epidemic or the war on drugs and marijuana? And there's
It wasn't an epidemic when there were only black and brown.
Which is why when we undertake criminal justice reform and reforming the war on drugs, it's got to be retroactive and it's got to have a view toward, it's why expungements are so important. It's got to have a view toward equity. And that needs to be at the heart of our policy as we move forward.
So I assume no Schedule 1.
What's that?
Take it off Schedule 1?
Yeah, I would, and yes, and
Okay.
and I would also end incarceration as a response to drug possession in general, because we have to do things differently. But yes, for marijuana, if we don't take it off Schedule 1, we're going to continue to see these problems in terms of getting access to capital, and it reinforces those inequities.
Just because I want time to take a picture, real quickly, 30 seconds?
Real quick, yeah. My question is, with the mental health crisis in our
Yes.
nation, how can that be addressed for our communities, our schools,
Yes.
military, and law enforcement?
Yes, so to keep it short, I'll encourage you to have a look at the website where we have a full plan, but we're looking at federal funding for what we call healing and belonging grants. Healing on the clinical side, providers, access, resources, telemedicine, everything that could make a difference there. But also belonging, because I do think that issue of belonging helps drive self-medication, addiction, and some of those problems. And communities that I belong to, from the community of veterans to the community of LGBTQ people, are especially impacted by this. And so but also culturally, there's a policy stuff, but culturally, we have to make it okay to talk about mental health issues and addiction. So that it is normal to talk about bipolar disorder as it is to talk about, you know, I'm getting a hip surgery next week, right? It's just that it feels like it's okay to talk about. And that's something that the tone set at the top can make a big difference. So short answer to a deep question, but hopefully that gives you a sense of it.
So guys, we need if it's okay, just a real quick group picture.
I would love